Recording in progress.
The Sunday. Let's make sure we have our spear and our blanket, and let's start. It looks pretty good. You guys are all seated. So a nice comfy seat. We'll just settle in with some exploration of our breath. And just settling here. Allow yourself the opportunity to feel into different emphasis. So maybe the exhale begins as the emphasis, or the inhale begins as the emphasis, and then flip that and let it be the opposite. Think about how intensely you allow either side of the breath to be expressed. Maybe play with that. Maybe it starts super slow and controlled, and works its way to a more powerful, or maybe it starts more powerful and it works its way into more ease. But explore here until you find something that really resonates with you this morning. Give ourselves 50 more seconds here. And then as you feel right, let's just take from the shape we're in our body into a fold. And again, just explore a little bit of this seated fold. This doesn't have to be a lot of forward movement. It can be kickstand with the arms, just to the point where we feel activation, or if the body is, particularly the hips, are willing, we can go a little bit lower. And just let your body settle here for another 15 seconds. Just finding this space. And then we'll walk back up to kickstand. So we all meet in a kickstand space. So hands are connected to the floor or mat in front of us. Bring your left hand in front of kind of the middle of the sternum. And let's go right hand to the hip. And from here, let's draw that right shoulder back into a pretty deep early lumbar twist. And then we'll relax, switch hands, right hand plants, left hand to the hip, and we take this into this nice little rotation. It's really shoulder led, and that helps put that torsion force lower in the back. Coming back to neutral, and then go back to your fold. So if kickstand feels appropriate, wonderful. If forearms are appropriate, wonderful. If forehead, all beautiful spots. Just a little bit of opportunity to experience the elongation or the opening of the back from that twist sequence. And last 15 seconds here. And eventually we'll walk back up to a vertical spine. Now let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. You can use your blanket towel underneath the knees if that feels appropriate for you. You don't need to. We won't be here too long. And let's start tops of the feet flipped and just neutral spine sinking back into child's pose. Thinking about how the hips are receiving the shape this early in class, how that weight of the torso is creating the impact at the hips, and then what you can do to shift the torso weight, right? So just a little core engagement can be really helpful in shifting the placement of that torso energy and the gravitational push on the torso. Even a little lateral sway sometimes is just enough to get us into the spot where we feel really locked in our placement. And last 5 seconds here. And we'll pull ourselves forward and into tabletop. Toes curl, we'll do a little down dog, lifting the seat and rolling back. Really get into that depth. And let's come back down to hands and knees. And we'll kick the legs out in front of us back to staff. If you want to use your blanket or towel for a little hip riser, wonderful opportunity to do so. And let's take our left knee and bring that into a bent space. So right foot extended straight out, toes towards the ceiling. Left foot's going to stay with that arch just on the inside of that right thigh. And give yourself a nice little squeeze and compression. Think about pulling the torso up as you do so. So it's not going into that flexion state in the spine, but really getting that length. And then once you feel like you've locked in that length, we can make a determination whether we want to take the ankle across the right thigh or not. So we're going to end up in a twist, but you can twist from the exact foot placement. If it's appropriate for you to take the ankle across, make sure the big toe mound on that left foot can anchor to the mat. Then the left hand's coming behind us and the right tricep is making its way tricep elbow area to that right tricep to left thigh. There we go. And we'll work our way around. Truly have to figure out this pretzel. The twist here resonates for most of us a little higher than that first twist we did. So now we're kind of working the way up the spine in this rotation. Not truly thoracic, but a lumbar thoracic combination here. And then we'll come back to neutral. Take the left ankle back across and then let the knee fall out wide. Okay, so we're gonna do an opposite fold. I think we did a figure four fold last week or some semblance of a figure four. We're gonna go towards the open thigh this time. The key is to keep that right glute anchored. So belly button goes towards the left thigh and then we're headed into this fold space. Remember that you can kickstand here. So kickstand, forearms, forehead are all still appropriate folds. And we're looking for the one that allows us to have the right glute connected. And while that glute is connected, still get this subtle twist / fold elongation. Also, just in case that right hamstring is being preventative, remember the right knee can bend. So you can take that and just soften that chain so that you have more space for the fold. Last 10 seconds here. And when you're right, when you're ready, let's walk ourselves up to, see, left leg's gonna extend to mirror the right, and we're gonna follow that into a little seated forward fold. And again, use your kind of own awareness here as to what fold is appropriate for you. So we have a lot of tools in our belt. Finger mounds and toe mounds can interlace and you can push those toes away. You can wrap the arms underneath the legs and get more of that compression space. You can just be in more of a traditional flexion, fold, whatever feels right and expansive to you. Let's use that. And we'll give ourselves 20 more seconds here. And before I forget, the story I'm going to tell today is not my story. It's an old yogic story. So I always like to make that differentiation. I'll probably tell it different if you've heard it before. And sometimes when I tell those old stories, I have a different moral at the end as well. When you're right, when you're ready, we're coming back up to vertical, bringing the right knee into the bent space, squeezing for the spinal elongation. So we're less concerned about the hip compression here. Hip compression is kind of like torso forward. We're vertical torso really elongating. And then once you feel like you've locked that in, we make the determination. Does the right ankle come across? And if it does, can we make sure that right toe mound is planted? Then the right hand is coming behind us, left elbow to right thigh, and we take that twist. Try to keep some awareness on that left foot so the left foot stays active, pointing towards the ceiling. And then just note where the twist manifests in the back. And eventually we'll come back to neutral. If the right ankle has crossed, it will come back to the left side. The right foot will, or the right knee, excuse me, will fall out wide. We'll turn the belly button down the middle of the right thigh. Left glute and left foot are staying active as we take ourselves into the fold. Really think about how we can anchor that glute tissue, and note that it may be significantly different on side one and side two. and you have that ability to kickstand or forearm or forehead, all of those are really nice. And whichever one gives you the maximum twist benefit with this forward tilt to the torso is what we're looking for. Don't think one is better than the other. Don't think one is right and one and two are wrong about that. One is better than the other. It's the one that works best for you. And we'll give ourselves 15 more seconds here. And when you're right, when you're ready, coming back to neutral, legs extend, and we're going into a seated forward fold. And we're going to give ourselves 30 more seconds here. And when you're right, when you're ready, we're coming back to a vertical spine. Okay, let's take our right ankle across our left thigh. Okay, so figure four shape. This is something that I used to spend a lot of time on, and we haven't done this in a very long time. So we're going to work on this anterior tibialis musculature. So this musculature sheath that rolls kind of on the outside of the tibia here. And our goal is going to be to capture this and really like dig in and then roll it back. Like you're trying to peel this musculature off the shin and try to drag it to the medial side. So to do that, fingertips kind of grip in like you're grabbing a roll of dough maybe, and then just really, really think about pulling that back. And as we pull that musculature, it takes a lot of work, but if we do this right, we can feel the tension points at the knee attachment and at the ankle attachment. And what ends up happening by freeing up some of this tacked down musculature is we get better knee movement. So just a real old school adjustment that I used to offer a lot that hasn't been around for a couple years. And we'll relax and we'll just let that be. And we'll take that straight to the second side. So left ankle crosses. Same thing. We're just trying to get those fingers kind of at the edge of that sheath of musculature and then pull that up like we're just trying to bring the anterior tibialis to the posterior side. Spine stays nice and long. Funky piece of musculature here because it's protected by the bone. It's very similar to rib cage musculature, that intercostal musculature. It's hard to access. So you really have to be manual in how we get this. And then we'll relax. And let's take so we're headed to our backs here. We want to have our spear around and we want to have our blanket around. And let's take our blanket towel from a shelf fold shape to a hot dog fold shape. And we'll just put that just below the shoulder blades. So as you lay down, the shoulder blades are on the mat and the blanket is kind of at the diaphragm level of the rib cage to the middle of the lumbar. If this feels like it's too much, right? This is a back bend. So if this back bend feels like too much out of the flexion that we've been in, pull the blanket out and just let your spine be neutral. If this feels like it's really nice across that scapula shelf, then let this sit here and just let your body ease into this. So there's this young, very dedicated yogic apprentice who's been working with this much, much older, wise kind of yogic master. We're going to give ourselves 60 more seconds here. And the apprentice has been working with this master for years now. And the master has told him, there's a final test. The final test is to go out into the jungle without anything and spend a week out there. And the yogic apprentice, he's very enthusiastic. He's very open to it. He's very up for it. Asks when. The yogic master says, tomorrow, arrive here before sunrise, and I'll point you in the right direction. When you're ready, toes or feet are going to bend, knees are going to bend, feet are going to come to the mat. That would be an appropriate way. And we'll lift our tailbone up to a nice little bridge just so that we can pull that prop out. And as the prop comes out and the spine comes back down, I want you to think about that soft tissue just below the shoulder blades on either side of the spinal column. And we're going to take our sphere and we're going to look for that tissue. So we're going roughly middle of the back here. If your ball is too dense, right? If you have a lacrosse ball, I'd normally have a lacrosse ball, but I couldn't find one. We're moving, so I'm using a rolled up sock today. But if it does feel too intense, you can put the blanket over the top and then roll that underneath and just make sure you have equal amounts of blanket on the left and right side. If it doesn't feel like it's too intense, you're welcome to be right under. And then you also remember you can always use the bridging capacity. So if you take your hips and you get the hips kind of slightly elevated so that there's a little bit more neutral pressure in the spine because you've taken off that lower hip pressure, you can make this more intense. And you can also ease away by kind of giving into a little toe pressure. And it doesn't take much just to allow a little more arch in the middle of the back. And we're just looking for a spot that really speaks to us. And then we're going to find stillness there. And through our stillness, settle into some exhale breaths that allow the musculature to relax. And so, as directed, this yogic apprentice shows up. His master is waiting for him at the front porch. And his master, without really saying anything, just points him in a direction. And he says, "This is your path. Follow it and come back after 7 sunrises." And so that's what the apprentice does. He turns and he heads in the exact direction that the yogic master had told him to head. And he tries to not deviate from this path at all. So even if there's like a giant bush in the way, he'll try to travel through the bush instead of going around it so he can stay directly on this path. Just settling into that exhale. We're going to be here for 60 more seconds, really thinking about exhales, finding the appropriate amount of pressure and using that appropriate amount of pressure to really get into the musculature here. Last full breath, big full inhale, and then that real deep level of release on the exhale. And when you complete that exhale, you can remove that prop from underneath you. Come back to neutral, let the bottoms of the feet come together and let the knees fall out wide. And feel how much of this mid back musculature is tied into this external rotation of the hips. Eventually, the knees come back up to neutral. We'll grab our prop and we'll place that under the second side, looking for that same set of musculature. You may not have that perfect awareness now on the second side. So use the first side as kind of the mirror and start to seek from an equivalent level there, the right spot for that sphere ball prop, and then set the intensity in a way that's appropriate for you as well. And then we relax and just settle into our breath so that the breath can be the tool that creates the change. And so for the entirety of the day, this yogi walks. And as the sun is starting to set, he's getting very thirsty. He just happens upon this stream. And so he's able to drink. And the next day is pretty much the same. Kind of towards the end of the day, he happens upon this stream. And the next, and towards the end of the day, he happens upon a stream. And for 6 days in a row, that's the case. And on the 7th day, there's not a stream, but there is this beautiful meadow and this clearing. And he hasn't eaten now. He's, the forest itself, the jungle itself has provided water, but it hasn't provided a lot of nutrition. So he's famished, he's tired, he's exhausted. And he sits down under this giant tree, and it's providing this cool shade. And he's, as fatigued as he is, he's appreciative of the experience he's had, how the jungle has really offered him what he needed. Last big breath here on this second side. And that full exhale that releases your body into the prop. And then at the end of the breath, we'll take the prop out from underneath us, come back to neutral, bottoms of the feet come together, knees fall out. And we settle here. We feel this mid-back shelf and how it is tied in with the external opening of the hips. And when you're ready, knees come back to neutral. Okay, so knees point straight up. Make sure you're roughly 2 fist distance between the knees here. We want to have a nice hip width. Bring your elbows and palms together so that the palms are roughly in front of the face and the elbows are roughly in front of heart center. And then this is a pretty intense little adjustment. So be really aware of how your body is responding. We're going to take the elbows over towards the left. So there's not a ton of room here. As the elbows are moving, we're not really twisting, right? But we're getting this big medial line of tissue of that subscapular tissue to pull and expand with us. So the right shoulder is roughly staying anchored. And we're going to come back to neutral, let the arms open to cactus. And then just kind of feel how that right shoulder blade responds to cactus now. It's relatively similar to the external rotation in that mid-back requirement. And then hands and elbows come together roughly at face and heart height. And then we take this rotation or pull over towards the right side. So left hand is coming over towards the right or over towards side 2. And now we feel that big medial pull of that subscapular tissue on the second side. And then we come back to neutral, arms open to cactus. Feet come out to the width of the mat and knees fall in towards one another this time. And just feel that posterior chain on the torso and the room you have. So while this young man is sitting underneath this tree and he's in this perfect little meadow and there's wildflowers and the breeze is kind of swaying this tall grass, he starts to hear this noise, and it's distinct rustling, and it's really terrifying. He kind of shoots up, and he's standing and he's gazing down at this noise, or where this noise is coming from, and he sees it's coming from a fox. But it's a very peculiar fox. It's a fox without any legs. When you're ready, and almost as his knees come back to neutral, sorry about that, and then let's let the knees fall over to the left. Arms stay at cactus. Almost as his eyes and brain kind of decipher what he's looking at, he hears a much more terrifying noise, a noise that is very distinct. And in this part of India is very well known and feared. It's the rumble of a tiger. And this tiger has this rabbit draped in its mouth. Rabbit is clearly recently deceased. And it steps into the clearing, and it's huge. It's the biggest tiger this young man has ever seen. And almost as if it doesn't see him, it turns, it walks directly in front of the fox. It drops the rabbit, and then almost as quickly as it appears, it disappears into the jungle. And the fox consumes this rabbit and then curls up and goes to sleep. Last 30 seconds here. And this young man observes this. And it's almost like he is struck by divine inspiration. When you're ready, knees come back to neutral, and then exhale over to that second side. He starts thinking about the days. You know, he was told by his master to go out for 7 days. The first 6 days, he was nourished with water at the end of the day. The 7th day, he found this meadow, and the jungle fed a completely helpless fox. A tiger appeared without explanation and fed this fox. And this inspiration hits him that the jungle will feed him. He should just sit and wait like this fox. And so he sits down underneath this tree. And a day goes past, and no food arrives. But the tiger shows up once again with a rabbit, feeds it to the fox, and disappears. And another day in the same thing. He's not offered anything, but the tiger appears and feeds the fox. And at this point, he's starting to get woozy. It's been 10 days since he's had any food. Back at his yogic master is starting to get worried. He sent him out for 7. He said, return after that. It's been 10. So the yogic master goes to look for this young man down the same path he sent him. When you're ready, knees come back to neutral. Push down to the toe mounds and heels. Give yourself a little bridge. Find that space. And then tailbone comes back down to the mat. The left foot is going to stay anchored. Right knee is going to come in for a nice little compression. Once you get that right hip compression, extend the left leg and just note how that changes the hip capacity. And then use your left hand to guide your right hand over into a twist. Now, we can use the left hand to help anchor that right leg. And you can stay with the knee bend. You can also extend that right leg and then maybe even extend that left hand for a deeper version of this twist. But that only makes sense if it feels good in your spine, right? The spine is really the guide this morning. So make sure wherever you end up, the spine is being receptive and it feels good. If the twist doesn't feel right, you can also use the blanket underneath blanket towel underneath that right knee. Gives it a little more support. And you don't have to use the top hand as pressure to deepen the twist either. So just making the appropriate choice. Right hand can tuck underneath your body and it can extend out towards cactus or T, or it can be down by your side. Whatever feels most appropriate for you. And so this yogic master is traveling fast. He is moving at a rate that is 3 days worth of what his young apprentice was traveling. So on the first day, he covers this massive amount of ground and he doesn't see anything. He does cross 3 streams. Back in the meadow, this young man is withering away. He's starting to feel pain within his body from lack of nourishment. And once again, he sees the tiger come with a rabbit that feeds this helpless fox. Last 30 seconds here on this first side. When you're ready, coming back to neutral. Setting and settling the spine here. Let the arms come out to cactus and let the bottoms of the feet come together, knees fall out wide once again. Feel the back's response. And then we'll bring our knees to neutral. Pull the left thigh in towards the rib cage. Give yourself that hip compression. Once you feel the hips kind of speak to you, then extend the right leg and feel how that hip capacity changes. Then the right hand is going to guide that left leg over to the right side. And we can once again settle into a twist that feels appropriate. Left arm can be a T or cactus or tucked underneath the body, whatever feels most appropriate for you. And we just settle into this twist. So the next day, this yogic master again covers 3 days worth of travel. And he doesn't see any sign of his apprentice, and he gets more and more worried. And meanwhile, back at the meadow, the apprentice has fallen over. He can no longer hold himself up. He's on his side, just kind of moaning in agony. When once again, this tiger comes into the clearing with a rabbit and feeds this helpless fox. We have 60 seconds here on the second side. And when you're right, knees coming back to neutral. Arms to cactus, bottoms of the feet fall. Bottoms of the feet come together, knees fall out wide for the last time here. Really feeling into how your body is settling. Knees come back to neutral. Eyes may close. Awareness certainly drifts within. Ask yourself if there's anything you want or need before Shavasana. If there is, offer that piece of movement, offer that piece of adjustment. Find the perfect place for your opportunity for stillness, and then settle in. And so on the third day, this yogic master hears the moaning of agony as he bursts into this little meadow. And he sees his apprentice on his side underneath a tree. He comes over and he sees the grave condition he's in. He offers food in these smallish pieces and water, and eventually he's able to revitalize this apprentice so he can sit. And he asks him, what happened? Why are you here? Why did you not come back? And the apprentice says, I witnessed what you sent me out here for. The jungle spoke to me in a divine way. And the master is just kind of looking at him blankly. And the apprentice doesn't say anything. He says, just sit here with me silently and I'll show you. Just finding your whole version of stillness when you are completely ready. And so sure enough, as the sun starts to set, this yogic master and his apprentice are sitting silently underneath this tree, and this tiger appears. And it plops a rabbit down in front of this helpless fox. And as quickly as it appears, it disappears. And the apprentice turns to the master and says, I knew that I was in the right spot when I saw this. Divinity spoke to me and told me that the jungle will take care of its creatures. And this yogic master, he has to acknowledge, he says, this is quite an amazing thing. You don't see tigers taking care of foxes. He says, I have to wonder why you chose to emulate the helpless fox and not this remarkably generous tiger. And we'll start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes. Up into our wrists and our ankles. And our elbows and our knees. Shoulders and hips. The back starts to move and explore. The neck starts to move and explore. The head, the jaw, eyes, and tongue all start to move. And eventually we utilize this movement to transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. We find our way to the seated space. Spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. And with your next inhale, we'll bring our hands together at heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, you double check you're following the right inspiration and see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Love the heck out of you. I'll be back tomorrow night to move, and we'll do this again next Sunday. If I don't see you before then, have a beautiful week. Love you.